Welcome to Psyche Magic, a podcast about self-discovery and the subconscious, where we explore the symbolic language of dreams, tarot, and archetypes. I'm your host, Jordan Hale. I'm a psychotherapist based in Nashville, Tennessee. Each episode, I'll hold a casual conversation with various artists and healers about their shadow work practices. We pull tarot cards, unpack a significant dream or dream theme, and discuss their personal healing arts practices. So please grab a cup of something delicious and stay a while. While aspects of this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is never meant to take the place of therapy. Welcome back to Psyche Magic. Halloween, or Samhain, is fast approaching here in the Northern Hemisphere, and I've been indulging in all my favorite spooky season treats. Pumpkin-flavored everything, horror movies, all things gothic and witchy, and of course, plenty of Halloween candy. I'm especially excited for my daughter Iris's first Halloween. We're dressing her up as a gremlin, a nod to our nickname for her during various growth spurts, where we referred to her as an angry milk gremlin. I am delighted to report, however, that we are now getting more smiles than frowns on average these days, and even the emergence of some laughter, which absolutely lights up my world. It has been challenging to maintain the podcast schedule in the midst of newborn madness. But this episode with my dear friend Caroline Brooks, aka BELLSAINT, came together seamlessly and beautifully and all in perfect time. In October of last year, she released I Used to Be Funny, one of my favorite albums of 2023 that I am still enjoying consistently today. With a through line of healing the trauma begotten by narcissistic abuse and religious trauma, these themes are heavy, but the music is luminescent and ethereal, the lyrics gutting and powerful. Her artistry is evident through every facet of the project, from the album art and imagery to her hilarious and honest social media presence. She is brave and inspiring, and our conversation taught me so much about maintaining one's artistry as a glimmer of hope amidst all manner of darkness that we inflict upon each other as humans. We talk a lot about sacred rage. Shout out to our ambassador to righteous female anger, Alanis Morissette. I've been thinking a lot about making space for anger when it shows up, honoring it instead of displacing it. The harrowing nature of raising an infant brings the shadow to the surface. Sleep deprivation ushers in a quick trigger temper, and any residual anger I haven't dealt with tends to come out sideways. Thankfully, our family is one that has learned to prioritize repair and responsibility taking in the moments that we inevitably mess up. I've also been noticing and considering the shades of narcissism that inevitably coincide with the choice to procreate. The trap we cannot help but ensnare ourselves in of hoping our children will resemble and complement us in pleasing and assimilative ways. So much of my time spent in the therapy room on both sides of the couch comes down to untangling what happens when this projection disappears. What happens between children and parents when their differing traits, needs, and values create divergent paths. I'm currently reading the book Far from the Tree, Parents, Children, and the Search for Identity by Andrew Solomon, who has this to say, quote, "We depend on the guarantee in our children's faces that we will not die. Children whose defining quality annihilates the fantasy of immortality are a particular insult. We must love them for themselves and not for the best of ourselves in them. And that is a great deal harder to do." Unquote. Learning to love each other, our children included, for themselves and consider them as autonomous beings with their own set of human rights is a distinct part of what I'm hoping is a way to build a kinder world in any and every small way I can. I'm hoping, always hoping this is possible. Caroline is someone who has fought so hard to reclaim and strengthen her voice from various contexts in which differences were not tolerated. A hero's journey, which is incredibly inspiring to me. I hope you take something encouraging and empowering from our conversation as well. All right. Caroline Brooks, aka BELLSAINT. Welcome to Psyche Magic, my dear. At last.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here.
At last. I finally got you on the show. I'm so happy. I've been wanting to talk to you for so long, and I think it's going to be so fun. So thank you for being here.
Oh my God, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy this is happening.
I am too. It looks so beautiful where you are. We were talking about how the light in your room is so like ethereal. And I know that you're in sunny Los Angeles right now. And I am in like a rainy, dreary day in Nashville. So I wish we were physically together in LA, but oh well, I can pretend. A lot of listeners might not know this, but I lived in LA for a very long time and I miss it. It's just such a fabulous place.
It is. We miss you too.
Aw, thank you. So let's dive in because we've got a lot to discuss. We were talking off mic about how like the themes that we're getting into today are just like very, very poignant to me, very relatable. I'm sure they will be to listeners as well. But yeah, I'm excited. Okay, I went ahead and pre-shuffled my tarot deck. Now, Caroline, are you like a tarot gal? Are you a tarot girly?
I am. Like a lot of my closest friends are big tarot card readers. They're very intuitive and so good at it. So I feel like I'm like tarot card adjacent.
Love.
Yes.
Wait, that's so fun. And I love that it sounds like they approach it from that more sort of like intuitive, open perspective, right? It's less of the like fortune tellery vibe.
Yes, exactly. A lot of them have religious trauma like me, so they're very like, it's open to interpretation.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're already starting here because that's what I literally always say. I'm like, for my religiously traumatized heart, this is so healing because there are no answers and there are no specific quote unquote meanings for the cards. They can mean whatever you want them to mean. Or whatever you are feeling or seeing on a certain day, even.
Yes.
And that is beautiful.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. The card that we pulled today is a minor arcana card. So this is the 8 of Cups, and I'll show it to you and I will describe it to the listeners. So the 8 of Cups has these cups in the foreground stacked up, and there's a figure leaving the sort of scene. So they're walking away. They have this red kind of cloak on. There's this like mountainous scene in the distance. And there's this like really interesting little moon with a face. Like it's like a little eclipsed moon almost, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Caroline, when you look at this, what comes up right away? Like, what do you notice? What draws you in? What happens for you?
Yeah. Well, instantly I'm noticing the person is walking away. So to me, that feels like leaving something that no longer serves you, or maybe walking away. It's interesting. The moon's expression, I don't know. It feels like it's kind of, it feels like a look of disdain, or maybe that's just my interpretation of it. But
look, yeah, it's not like a happy face.
Yeah, it feels like a somber, like maybe a necessary change, or like a growing pain of walking away from something. Also, the person walking away is with its back to the, not camera, back to the card.
Right. Like our perspective. Yeah.
Yes. And they're wearing red, which is interesting. Makes me think of like Scarlet Letter or something that's like, you know, like, oh, maybe something that needs to go is going.
Sure.
That's kind of what I'm getting.
I love that so much. I had never, because I've seen this card in many different readings and many different contexts, but I've never thought about like the scarlet letter question of like, could there be some kind of like outcasting that's happening, right? This is a really interesting card. I've actually pulled this card a good bit, and it's cups, and the cup suit is my favorite suit. It's the suit of the emotional realm, which is,
Yes.
those are the waters that we swim in so often as creatives, right? Like as creative
Yes.
people, we're always kind of wading into the water and seeing what is there. So, yeah, this card is about the emotional world. And at least right now, I do feel what you're saying about like there is a call to leave something behind, perhaps. And it's funny because as many times as I've seen this card, I've never described the moon as like an eclipsed moon before. But what I'm remembering right now is that we actually just had a lunar eclipse last week, and it was a pretty big deal, like astrologically. And lunar eclipses are all about like a new chapter and like shedding something and walking away from something so I can go towards something new.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think this is a card about maybe building something and then knowing when it's time to move on.
Yeah.
Love it. So
I
we'll
love
keep
that.
that here. I kind of like prop it up where I can see it during our conversation and just like return to those themes in case they are, useful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 8 of Cups. We're here for you.
8 of Cups in the fields.
In the feels always. That's just, I don't know. That's just like where I live. Like, it's so funny because people will ask me about being a therapist. And I'll be like, what's it like to like deal with feelings all day? And I'm like, that's just my life. Like, that's just what I do.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I'm in my feelings all the time. Like,
yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah. Like what other way is there?
Literally, how else do people do it? Like,
yeah.
I can
walking around being a brick wall. I
I can see that you know what I mean. Yeah, it's like what other way is there?
Yeah.
So 2 deep feelers talking about dreams. That's exciting. I love that. Okay, so yeah, let's get into our dream discussion. Caroline, you brought this really interesting dream. I mean, it's a recurring dream, which are honestly, I love all of my different dream discussions I've had on the show, but I especially love a recurring dream. They're just so meaty, and it just is really, really fascinating to me. So, to the extent that you feel comfortable, please just share a little bit about this dream that you've presented, any details that you want to include, and then we'll just kind of tease it out together and just see what comes up.
The most recurring dream I've had throughout my life, and it's always strange because I think I'll be like, oh, that's like a dream I used to have when I was a kid. And then it'll pop up in different moments in my adulthood where I'm like, oh, maybe I need it. And it's usually when my schedule is like crazy busy or I'm distracted. So the dream that I have that's recurring is I end up finding out that I have a pet cat, and the cat is usually like really emaciated, and I've forgotten about it. And I'm like, oh my God, this cat is starving, it's thirsty. And I end up, running around trying to find like food or water, and there's nothing in the pantry, there's nothing in the fridge. Like I go to the grocery store, everything's out, and this cat is, and I it's so stressful because I'm like, this creature that is under my care is going to die if I don't find something soon. And it's like usually, in points in my life where I'm busy or trying, or I'm like suppressing something, or I'm, especially growing up in like a Southern Baptist evangelical background where I'm making sure everyone else is taken care of, but I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not sleeping, I'm not setting boundaries, or I'm, filling up my schedule and saying yes. And like I don't know, it feels like maybe it represents like my inner child that I'm kind of just like deserting or not feeding. I don't know. That's kind of where my brain goes with that.
It sounds like you've had the dream enough times and in enough different contexts, because I really think that it's a very helpful clue to examine like what is going on in my life at the time that I'm having this dream, right? So you've noticed there's this pattern of like these moments where I'm sort of falling into patterns that involve some self-abandonment.
Yeah.
But again, like a sort of learned version of that behavior, right? That has come out of these different contexts in your life.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about the symbol of the cat specifically. Like, if you
Yeah.
want to just associate a little bit about kind of cats and like what cats mean to you.
We adopted and rescued a cat when I was 5, and I named her Skittles. So I was like 5 when I named her.
So cute.
But she was like, I grew up loving cats. I have a cat now named June that I'm obsessed with. It feels like an inner child or
Sure.
something that's very precious to me, something that's been like entrusted to me, that's in my
Hmm.
care. I don't know. Maybe there's like a theme of like motherhood, maybe, where
I was wondering about that.
I'm like, I've always been like, I don't think I would make a good mother.
Mm.
I would be so, I would just completely, I don't know. There's that fear there, I guess, and
Sure.
where it stems from, maybe.
Sure. Well, yeah, because the way that you describe your relationship to cats is that it's one of nurturance and love, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so it's not just this esoteric symbol, right? Like, oh, cats are like the deities of the Egyptian world. No, this has a very personal meaning to you. And I do tend to read dreams as like each figure in the dream is a part of us. And so I think it's really interesting that you kind of honed in on this inner child version of the
yeah,
cat and of what's going on. I mean, it's so true that the inner child is all of our responsibilities to care for. Like we're tasked with that in life, right? It's up to us.
yeah,
Okay, so you've noticed that this dream comes up in these specific moments where it's hard for me to meet my needs. It's hard for me to set things up the way that I need to in order to feel okay. And I'm curious, like, how long you've been having this dream. Like, when do you remember it sort of starting?
yeah. I mean, I remember I had it a lot when I was a kid, and it would come up. It could also be like this shadow self that I had been like
Sure.
thing, or maybe like I realized, I'm kind of embarrassed to say like I didn't really realize how much anger and rage I was
Mm.
suppressing until like my mid 30s, where I'm like, I think I just need to find a room and just break some shit and
No, I
just
hear
like,
it on the album, dude.
oh
Like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
yeah. It's like this, like, sacred rage.
Yeah, it was, and it's funny because the therapist that I started going to, she was like, the truth will set you free,
Mm.
but first it'll piss you off.
Hmm.
And, especially like again, growing up in that like evangelical background and being a female, it's like
Yes,
anger, nobody lets you feel it. There's never any kind of outlet where you can be like rightfully angry,
that's
where
right.
you're like, I'm consistently being dehumanized and I have opinions and experiences and like ambitions that are constantly kind of being like belittled, and I'm made to feel like I shouldn't exist or I should exist like teeny tiny little box that nobody can exist in. And there was just this I don't know, so maybe the cat could also be this like repressed rage, which yeah, that was like a lot of what the album that I released, I guess almost a year ago. Wow,
Is it
that's,
a year ago? Wow.
I know it came out in October, but yeah, that
Dang.
was so like a lot of those songs I wrote, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to put these out. They're really personal. And also, rage and anger is something that I appreciate when other artists, kind of put that out there unfiltered.
I
But
know.
I myself was so terrified to do that.
Mm.
But I'm really glad I did.
I want to hear more about Glad I Did. So we'll wrap up a little bit of this dream discussion and then I want to go back to that. Oh wait, I was going to ask is it a black cat in the dream?
Yeah, usually.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked that is that that can sometimes represent like a shadow figure, like the actual color black. So
Yeah,
it's interesting that you put it that way. Like,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
some of the, like you said, righteous anger, but repressed feelings that I have not been allowed to feel for one reason or another. And just
Yeah.
that kind of dying on the vine feeling of not getting to express those things, not having
Yeah.
space to express those things. And the way that I always frame this sort of narcissistic abuse dynamic, which is like the erasure of not being able to express those things.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Exactly.
yeah, I'm literally wasting away. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And you also are surrounded by people that think anger is like a sin or evil
Yeah.
to express. And
Mhm.
so I internalize that as this, like, oh, there's something wrong with me because I
You
feel this.
shouldn't feel that way. Yeah.
Exactly. So, like, when it would, of course, it would like sneak out in
Hmm.
random, weird, passive aggressive, small ways. It was
Hmm.
like, oh, what is wrong with me that I have this like
Yeah.
undercurrent of rage and everything, you
Mhm.
know?
There must be something wrong with me, which is the
Yeah,
other
exactly.
telltale sign of like a narcissistic abuse dynamic is there's no space for processing those feelings.
Yeah,
They have to be quashed down because there's no space to question
yeah, exactly.
the narcissistic dynamic, the motives there. It's a one-way street.
Yeah. And they're not gonna self-reflect. So there's
Mm-mm.
that pressure of like, well, if anything's gonna move forward, it's gonna be just for me apologizing and just saying, whatever it is, it must be my fault, like internalizing
Yes.
all that.
I would say that it's probably the biggest telltale sign of that type of dynamic is that there is never, literally never, any remorse or responsibility taking, accountability taking. It,
Right.
it, it always comes down to you, the person on the other side of this dynamic, is the one that is wrong. And I'm always right
Yes.
without fail. Like, and I mean, I don't know what you think about this from your perspective, but from my perspective, I have framed my relationship to the evangelical church as a, child and teenager, the indoctrination of that. I have framed that relationship like systemically as like a narcissistic dynamic because there was
Right.
never any room for questioning
Yeah.
or calling out when something was not okay or when something
Yeah.
was wrong. It was just this sort of totalitarian vibe. Like,
Yeah. You just kind of have to submit. There's no
mhm,
room to be. Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
mhm.
And it's also like, you can't grow when curiosity is punished, you know?
Wow. Yes. Thank you. That's literally the antithesis of growth and learning. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, "Oh," and then the other thing is being like, "Oh, I guess I'm this, evil person because I have questions or I have
Hmm.
doubts or, I'm practicing critical thinking before I knew what that was,
Hmm.
and it was, being like demonized or punished, which is
Yes.
such a mind fuck of its own?
Yes, exactly. A normal developmental task is cast under this kind of cloak of shame.
Yeah, it's so interesting too, and I'm even grateful that I had like music as an outlet because so much of like music
Yeah.
wrote, even like as a kid, was like I'm not able to express this to any adults or anybody nearby, but I can like write this down in a notepad in like a way where I can actually kind of freely explore and express this feeling. But I don't know. I'm curious how you like what was your outlet? I know you're the one asking me questions, but like what your outlet was during that time to like kind of keep you sane?
Yes, because you are sharing that you had music as this kind of window
Mhm.
into your inner world, right? When there was no other avenue or place for that. And that makes perfect sense. I would also say that I had music, and while I was not necessarily like writing or composing music, I was engaging with music in a way that allowed me to unlock different like versions of my experience and
Yeah.
to feel seen and to feel
Sure.
heard. I'm lucky that I grew up in a household where there was freedom in terms of the sort of art that I wanted to engage with was not like overly censored or policed, which is not the case for a lot of those who grew up in like fundamentalist religion. So I'm lucky in that way that I was getting a, broader view of the world through the art that I was collecting and enjoying.
Yeah.
So I would say that was absolutely part of it for me. And it was also it was my relationships, and it was having relationships with people who were not in the church and were not indoctrinated in the ways that I was and that my family was, and growing those relationships and starting to learn and understand that there are other ways of being in the world that are equally good. So yeah, I'm sure there's like a lot more I could say about that, but those are the things that come to mind first. Music absolutely was part of that and still is. I don't know what I would do without it.
Yeah, for real.
I'm so glad that you had that, Caroline. Like just from like one person who's been through some shit to another, like I'm so glad that you were able to tap into that. Like what a lifesaver.
Me too. Thanks for saying that. It's crazy too, because there was like a point where I was like almost afraid to go to therapy because I was like,
oh my God, yes. So real.
Right. Like, what if I heal all my demons and then I have nothing to write about? What if,
so real.
You know what I mean? Because what if, you stop having, you have so much love and health in your life that what if I no longer want to, what if I don't need music anymore, or I don't want to, I don't even want to write, or I have nothing to write about?
Sure. The thing coming to my mind right now, I don't know if it makes sense, but it's like the dynamic of like a trauma bond. And so it's almost like having a trauma bond with like your musical practice.
You're like,
what's going to happen when I like get better? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, am I going to even have a personality if I don't have trauma?
No, literally. It's like, I'm laughing because I'm like, I feel that so much. Yes. Yes. I think a lot of artists deep down feel that way too.
Yeah.
Like I have to have the suffering and the turmoil like front and center in order to make something worthwhile. Yeah.
I think even like Miley Cyrus has said that in interviews where she's like afraid when a relationship starts. Me too. When a relationship starts like going really well, she starts panicking and is like, oh, now I'm not going to have, I need the chaos. I need the drama, which I can relate to. But also I think as I'm getting older and like healing more and more, I'm like, oh, I actually just enjoy ideas for songs come from, just being part of the world and having relationships and having conversations. And I think there's always going to be that, like, I don't know, I'm kind of an observer of like human beings and like what connects us and what hurts us and what, I don't know. That sounds so pretentious, I feel like. But
no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because as you're speaking about that, I'm thinking about how profoundly healing it is to reach a point where you can be present and engaged in your world and in your daily life and not dissociated, not playing a role, right? Not lying to yourself, not acting. What a gift. And also, yes, of course, good art comes out of that because it's authentic. So that makes sense.
On that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Tell me about your healing journey. It sounds like you've been on this path for a while. What does it look like? What have you leaned on in terms of healing practices?
Man, well, I left Texas and moved to LA in like 2006, 2007. So I was like 21. I wouldn't recommend anybody move to LA by themselves at 21. Like looking back,
dude,
like
seriously,
it's crazy.
A jungle out there.
It is. And it's crazy because I also feel like I had a very fake relationship with my family.
Mm-hmm.
It was very superficial, and like a lot of the relationships I had were very superficial because I also
Naturally.
was so like disconnected with myself, and I thought I had to be this version of myself to be accepted. And
Nodding, relating.
right.
Yes.
And I knew like, and I love Texas. There are a lot of people that I love that still live in Texas, but I, personally was just like, I need to get out. When I was a freshman at UT Austin,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, when I was a freshman in college, I just was like drinking so much to just
Yeah.
completely like dissociate.
Yep.
I had no idea what was happening. My body knew that I wanted to get out of Texas before my mind knew,
Absolutely.
And I like took an internship with a UT Austin alumni at like a talent agency, and I knew I wanted to do music, and I ended up like dropping out of college to move to LA. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until I left and was on my own, like as tumultuous and crazy as it was, like leaving, Tyler, Texas.
I'm from Texas too. Yes.
Yeah, where
I
in
know
Texas?
Tyler. I'm from
Yeah.
Houston. I mean, I grew up in Houston, was born in Dallas, but yeah, I know Tyler, Texas.
I know it was like I had these like weird tools that really helped me when I moved to LA. It was just like, if anything, it made me more susceptible to being like manipulated because I
Sure.
was just like, oh, I just need to be this submissive people pleaser. And, when you move to LA by yourself and you're 21 and you're a girl, like there are like creepy older men that
Oh
are
yeah.
preying on you that are everywhere. And so a lot of that healing journey was just like going through it and learning from mistakes, and ultimately learning like I need to listen to, like, I have this internal gut that's telling me this person's unsafe that
Yes.
I'm choosing to ignore.
Well, that I have been trained to ignore, right?
Yeah.
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 To be fair.
That's true. That's a lot kinder to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And, moving from growing up in a Christian environment and also kind of like I wanted to experience the world for myself and kind of go like, is this what I believe, or is this kind of what I'm taught to believe?
Totally.
I'm just doing it out of obedience. And so I was like, at the time when I was like singing in different churches and doing like church gigs,
Oh
and
yeah.
it wasn't until like a couple years of living in LA that I started seeing like, oh, some of the stuff that's teaching me to ignore my like internal like instincts. I didn't think I realized how deep the religious trauma was until like a couple years in. And it was, I broke up with somebody. I was dating somebody that after I broke up with him, a lot of my friends came out of the woodwork
Oh.
and were like, I'm so glad you broke up with this guy. He was so rude. And when I was hearing back stories of like things this guy had said to me, I was like, why did I date? Why did this feel familiar? Why did I date this guy that everyone was, he was very obviously like, kind of verbally abusive to me and
Yeah.
like putting me down.
Yeah.
So that's when I started going to therapy and started doing more like self-help books. I started
Absolutely.
The Body Keeps the Score, which is like, that's a heavy read, by the way.
Seminal. I know. Yeah. Even as a clinician, that's a heavy read. And I always tell clients that, like, much
Yeah.
less for someone who hasn't even learned about psychology. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's comforting to know. I feel like
it's really intense.
I get through like half a chapter
I
and I have
know.
to just kind of sit with my thoughts for a sec.
I know. I understand. Yeah.
But yeah, and there's a lot of I definitely feel more in tune with myself, and I feel like I have a lot of relationships around me that are healthy and that I'm able to kind of just be myself. I feel
Yeah. So
more
healing.
right. I feel more seen in those relationships, and I also feel more seen in my music So I don't feel like there's this like, oh, I've got to live up to this like unrealistic, I don't know. I feel less pressure in that way to be something I'm not, which is nice. And maybe a part of that is also getting older, and you do kind of get to a point where you're like, oh, I don't have the energy to I don't have the energy to lie or
I know.
something I'm not.
I'm tired.
Yeah. Like, oh, I know. Or, and also having experienced it before and tried to be the perfect, version of a woman for
Oh, I
everybody.
know.
You're like, oh, I've tried this. This is stupid and doesn't exist.
Yeah,
And, you know,
absolutely. Well, and I appreciate just even you taking us through that kind of chronological arc of your healing journey and just helping us understand that for one thing, it's not linear. Like as you're describing, in your dreams and in your work and elsewhere, this is an ongoing process. This is
right.
ever unfolding. And you mentioned this when you were talking about your dreams. You mentioned that like some of these themes also resolved for you when you got yourself out of an old context, right? And so now I'm looking at Eight of Cups again. Like I walked away and I let go in a certain aspect. There's like a trust fall there, right? Like I'm leaving what I know. I'm starting something new. I have no idea how this is going to go, but I know I need something that's mine. And that's brave. And you did that. And you were saying that one of your dreams around these like similar themes kind of resolved around that time, right? It was like, I needed to get out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I was surprised because I had that dream. The last time I had that dream was maybe about a year ago, and I was really surprised because I was like, whoa, I haven't had this dream in a very long time. But it was also, again, one of those times where I was saying yes to everything. This industry kind of lends itself to feel like, oh, if I don't say yes to this, then nothing else is going to come along. What if I don't know. I don't know if I believe in like big breaks anymore. It just feels like a lot of little things. But yeah, also like putting up with or not having boundaries with certain personalities that feel entitled to your time
Oh, that's such a good way to put it.
right. It's like they have more of a platform or they have this and they feel like you are just kind of on call for them.
Yes.
I mean,
yes. It's a version of the dynamic we were talking about earlier where there is no you, there is no your perspective. There is how will you serve me?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the lens in these dynamics always. Again, every single time. Every single interaction. It's that.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know, obviously, you don't have to share that other dream, but it was a similar theme of like, there is something going on here that needs my attention, right? Like there's a dynamic that is involving self-abandonment. It doesn't feel right. And I love examples like this because I love thinking about how our subconscious often has our back, you know? Like,
totally.
If we're not seeing something, there's a part of us, a wise part that will just so gently, like, okay, maybe not always gently. Sometimes our dreams are really intense, but they will patiently, perhaps I should say, continue presenting that material to us over and over and over again for as long as it takes to integrate.
Totally. I know. It also is like, it's interesting because the dream that I was having that I haven't had since I was a kid or since I was like, living in Tyler with my family. But yeah, the dream of like that there were like monsters like banging on all the windows of the entire house. And then like people in the family that are supposed to protect you are the ones like opening up the windows and letting in the monsters and being like, it's okay, you're fine. And
yeah, this is all fine. What do you mean this is all fine? Yeah, no,
exactly.
It's not. Yeah.
And also the feeling of like, when you're constantly taught to ignore the red flags that are going off in your stomach, you're kind of like, even just like I was very sensitive to when adults were manipulating me or like
Mm-hmm.
fear mongering. And like,
Yeah.
even as a kid, I was like, I didn't feel like I had like mentors because I was like, why would I look up to these people that are constantly lying to me to control me? I feel like that would show up in dreams, like the subconscious part of me that was trying to be like, my gut was saying, this person's unsafe. You can't trust this person. They're unsafe. They're manipulating you and they have their own like agenda. And
Yeah.
then in dreams, it would kind of be like, hey, listen to that feeling. That's
I
real.
know. Here is this like very overt depiction of that
Yeah.
dynamic, right? Like that sort
Yeah.
of drama that plays out with these obvious symbols and characters. Yeah.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Dreams are interesting. I was listening to one of the podcasts that you did with the religious trauma
Oh yeah.
specialist.
Laura Anderson. Yeah.
Yes. I think y'all described it as like this subconscious when they're I'm butchering the way that y'all put it, but it's like the subconscious trying to work itself out like in
Mhm.
your dreams.
Yep. I mean, I'm guessing I have ADHD, so my memory is awful. But I am guessing that the word we used was integrate. Like I'm trying to integrate something that I know deep down from that intuitive place that is so easy to talk ourselves out of when it comes to
Mhm.
our thinky brains. Yeah.
Right.
Not to mention all of the overt messaging that we get around talking ourselves out of our intuition. But
Right.
there's like an integration that our systems are seeking, like an integration of wisdom, of knowledge, of understanding. And so yeah, it's just so interesting to see when a theme does sort of resolve or integrate. It's like, okay, that lesson has been ingested now at this point.
Yeah, for
Like at least enough, right? Yeah.
yeah. And then you wake up and like in real life, you're like, you get those instincts where you're like, this person, I can't trust this person. But then the like people pleasing takes over and the like the stuff you're trained to do takes over because you're like, oh, I
Of
feel
course.
bad for this. I feel
Yes.
bad for this person. And you're like, you're feeling bad for the person that's trying to,
Maybe I can help them.
exactly. Exactly.
Just me. Okay.
Oh, yeah, not you, not
I
just
can
you.
fix them. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Maybe I'm just maybe there's a different way I can say this so that they'll
Yeah.
understand.
How can I help? Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of like, get the fuck away from me.
Yeah, right? I know. Sometimes the most healing and best thing you can do is tell someone to fuck off.
100%. 100%. Okay, that feels like the segue into talking about the album. Because as you've said, I am channeling some sacred rage. I am talking about some things that are very vulnerable on this record. It is not lost on me, the bravery that takes. And you alluded to this earlier, but here we are a year later, and it sounds like you're saying, I'm glad I did it. So tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, what's so funny is that I wrote those songs because I was like, I need to write because it kept coming out and I had all this suppressed
Mm-hmm.
anger and rage that was coming out like in therapy and where I was really just kind of letting myself feel it. And it was also in the pandemic. So,
Yeah,
I didn't have like shows or, sessions or whatever. I didn't have these things to like distract me. I just kind
sure.
of had to sit with myself and really kind of process all that.
Mm-hmm.
And music has always been like my go-to way of kind of expressing myself and feeling seen. And I kind of had to go, and I was so scared to even like have like some of this stuff out there, but I was like, I'm going to write this and then I'll decide later if I'm going to release it.
What a great practice. There's no pressure. I'm just going to give myself this experience.
Yeah. Because then you can just be honest
That's right.
and go, you're not thinking about how is this going to be received.
That's right.
And then when it came down to it, I was like, you know what? I really want to put this out there because a lot of the artists that I really look up to and admire and respect had the balls to put out music that was just angry. Like I remember the first time I heard Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill.
You just read my mind. I was going to say Jagged Little Pill.
I was like, and what's so funny is that my older sister had the Jagged Little Pill CD.
Yeah.
And so I like burned a copy for myself. And then, my parents, like, they wanted her to throw away or burn the CD because here's the crazy thing.
I have a story about this too. Yes.
Oh my God. So they wanted her to throw away the CD, and it wasn't because of the language or because the mention of like, blowjobs or anything in a theater. It was the reason why they wanted her to throw away the Alanis Morissette CD was because it was disrespectful to men, quote unquote. I know. I was like,
wow.
I know. So like that and artists like Fiona Apple, where you're just like, I just need to go on a walk and put headphones on and listen to this album and just kind of like punch the air for a sec.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of wanted an album like that. And
oh yeah.
I was so confident that I wanted it out there, and then I put it out there. And then there was like a time after I put it out where I kind of had this like vulnerability hangover where I was like,
what have I done?
Did I make a mistake by putting that out there?
I can't. Pandora's box has been open. I can't put it back. Yeah.
I can't hide, or like now my story's out there. And it was funny too, because a lot of the music I had done before that had been like, I work a lot with my sync company, Secret Road. And so a lot of the people I work with, like a lot of the music is geared towards being a little more metaphorical and not as like specific with lyrics. And so it was funny. I had this album and I sent it to my sync company, and I could tell they were kind of like, cool, we don't really know.
We'll see what we can get.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, even now I kind of go back and forth because, even like my sisters and I, like I sent it to them and they were kind of uncomfortable with it. And that made me nervous. But
of course.
Yeah. And so I go back and forth. Sometimes I'm like, no, I'm really proud that I put that out there. Yeah. The cool thing about this album that was so different from other things that I had put out there is I kind of had this like longing to reconnect with my hometown because I feel like I just kind of left.
Sure.
But the cool thing about this album were a lot of people from my hometown, like a lot of people that I went to high school with or that I, went to church with in Tyler reached out to me.
Wow.
And they were like, different songs like stood out to them. And they were like, this really, speaks to me. Like, a lot of my friends, even like some of my LGBTQ friends that decided to stay in Texas, like despite what's going on, there politically. But yeah, I felt very, very seen, and I felt affirmed by people that I grew up with that felt affirmed by it. And that felt very fulfilling.
Yes. Well, you got to give the gift that you've been given so many times, which is that gift of authentic, unapologetic expression. And it's incredibly powerful, Caroline. Like I have rage, scream, cried, listened to these songs over and over again myself, and they are so cathartic. It's so, so, so powerful what you've made.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. It's a lot.
Absolutely. It's true. And it says a lot that you've been hearing from people about how it has affected them. It means you're doing something real.
Thank you. Yeah, that felt really good kind of connecting in that way.
I bet. No, I bet. Ugh, there's so much more that I want to say, like these conversations just an hour just evaporates and I'm always like,
it's already been an hour.
Where's the time gone? What's happening? But I want to make sure that we don't leave this conversation without talking about just your work, where you are currently. You've mentioned that you have some projects that are happening that are very exciting. So I want to make space for you to talk about if there are current things that you want to share, upcoming things, right? Just kind of like giving listeners ways to follow along with what's coming.
Yeah, I'm I'm working on another album. I'm putting a bunch of songs together, kind of figuring out what goes out as a single and what goes on an album, or, if anyone even listens to albums anymore.
I do. I'm going to raise my hand and say I
Yay!
still love an album. I love a start to finish album as long as it's good.
Yeah.
Right? That's the hard part. It's like,
I feel the same
where are
way.
the good albums? Yeah.
Some of my favorite songs are the songs that are like the first songs on the album that are usually not a single, but they kind of open up the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm also excited because Issa Summers, who is also known as the Machine in Florence and the Machine, she like writes and produces a lot of stuff with Florence and the Machine, and she's brilliant and a badass. I got to work with her when I recorded the Alanis Morissette cover for Little Fires Everywhere. We're working on some songs together.
Amazing.
I think she just finished producing the newest Florence and the Machine album, and now she's doing
I
one.
I love that album, by the way. Obsessed.
Oh my God. Well, I think the one that Florence just put out is the one with Jack Antonoff, I think. But then, unless I heard incorrectly, but I think the newer one that she's getting ready to put out, I think is the one she did with Issa.
Nice.
But Issa is working on a new album of her own, and she wants to collaborate on a few songs, and I'm so excited. They're super haunting and beautiful and ethereal, and
love.
We're working on some songs together, and I'm super stoked about that.
It's so fun. Oh, that's so exciting.
Yay!
I mean, I'm not surprised. That feels like such an appropriate like collaboration. It just makes perfect sense to me.
Thank you. It's crazy how things like kind of come full circle. Like even just being obsessed with Alanis Morissette and then being asked to do that cover for Little Fires Everywhere. I was like, this feels like I manifested this or something.
You probably did.
I think I did.
I think you did.
But yeah, I'm very grateful.
I love it. I was going to say the Alanis Morissette, like just mental connection that we had a minute ago was so funny that like that was the first album that like came to mind, is that it was just the first example I had heard of like what you're talking about, which is allowing a woman to just speak, right?
Yeah.
Like unvarnished. There's every feeling is available and accessible. And yeah, that was transformative. I had never heard that before. So
yeah.
In the legacy of Alanis Morissette, may you go forth and continue emoting all of the feelings all the way, dialed up to 11, because we need it. Like, we need it so badly.
Yeah. I think that's one of the great things about getting older when you're a woman. You're like, oh, I don't need permission. I can just say exactly what's on my mind. And
I'm allowed to do that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm very excited for what's ahead.
Good. I know, because in fact, the world needs more of that. So please keep it coming.
Thank you.
We need it. Things are crazy out there. I'm just thinking back to like the way that you described your dream, and it made me wonder, because listeners I know will be interested in this. You mentioned that like the cat figure was a part of like your inner child. And I'm curious if you feel like inner child work is a part of your sort of like process or your artistry. Is that something that you like consciously try to like cultivate or tap into? Do you have practices around that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. I'm getting better at, I mean, this sounds like such an obvious, like duh thing to say, to someone who's a trained therapist, but I feel like within the past couple years, I've gotten a lot better at being more compassionate to myself and catching myself. And also, being married to Kyle, who's also a very emotionally intelligent person. And when you're doing life with somebody, they're kind of a mirror. And, he was like, you talk so negatively about yourself and you're so hard on yourself. I hate hearing you. And so I started catching myself more, and I'm getting better at not judging myself by the thoughts that I have or just the the cruel passing thoughts that enter my head and
automatically. Yeah. Right.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm able to kind of just go, oh, that was a thought, but it doesn't make it true.
Exactly.
And also post, deconstructing and, not going to church in a while. There aren't as many like microaggressions. There aren't as many like subtle gaslighting. And so I've been more compassionate with myself and my inner child. And honestly, kind of a boring answer, but even just having moments of like looking in the mirror and being like, you are loved, you belong,
fabulous,
are safe, and just kind of shifting some of the like cruel thoughts that go into my head that are really, judgmental towards myself, and just kind of catching them and going, you made a mistake. You're human, or
so what?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that in and of itself just has been helpful.
That's so great to hear, Caroline. These things are not obvious, myself included. We all need reminders of like how simple these practices can be. Like, I love your idea of the sort of affirmations, right? That I'm just using here and there, looking in the mirror, having a different narrative to present to myself besides the automatic, harsh, critical narrative. What else can I bring? What is more compassionate? What is more kind? What is more loving? Again, it's like we just have to do it over and over and over again. It doesn't just like click into place one day. It's just a practice.
Yeah. I've also noticed that it opens up, my friendships have gotten deeper and better. When you're kinder to yourself, you're a lot more, kinder to everyone else. Surprise, surprise. Who would have thought?
Absolutely. And also you take less shit.
Yeah, that too.
Like it's both.
Yeah. You're no longer trying to, when somebody is, making you feel small, there's not that desire to change their mind.
That's right.
Oh, I need to get this difficult, mean person to like me and see me. It's more like, okay, I know where this goes. I'm gonna walk away now.
That's a boundary. Bye. Yeah. And that's where anger is that great signal of like, oh, that's a boundary. Like, I don't like that.
Exactly. And definitely necessary.
That's not okay.
Industry, because there are a lot of narcissistic personalities that you need kind of
big time.
Boundary setting definitely
big
helps.
Time. I know. We could have a whole other conversation just unpacking like narcissistic abuse and what that is. But I didn't want that to be the theme of the show. Like, I wanted our conversation to be much more broad, but that obviously could be its own topic because it's very complex.
Yeah.
But guess what? This is my show and I get to do whatever I want. And I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to do it.
Yes. As the great Alanis Morissette has taught us.
Oh, bless her. We worship at her altar. Okay, last question. Where can listeners find you, follow along with your work? How can they engage? Please.
Yeah, I am on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook at BELLSAINT Music. Yeah, I'm on all streaming platforms as BELLSAINT. It looks like I'm going to be having a single coming out in October that I'm very excited about also. So yeah, follow me I'm also on YouTube if you want to subscribe.
I love it. We'll be on the lookout for the new single because I think this episode's going to air in October. So that's perfect. Caroline, thank you for being here. This was such a just delightful, juicy, vulnerable conversation that I love. So thank you for being down. Thank you for being so open with us. I know that it's going to be so helpful for listeners, and it is for me too. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited we got to do this.
Me
and tell
too. Oh my gosh, of course. Oh, okay. Thank you, girl. That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you again to my guest, Caroline Brooks, aka BELLSAINT. May your sacred rage and beautiful artistry continue to light the way for our collective healing. We'll see you back here next month with another amazing guest. If you want more Psyche Magic, be sure to check out the Psyche Magic Salon on Substack. There you'll find all full and bonus episode archives for the podcast, as well as my weekly written newsletter with magical musings and recommendations for sources of creative inspiration. You'll also find the recorded version of our salon ritual to invoke creative flow. That's psychemagic.substack.com. If you haven't already, please take a moment now to subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcast app of choice. It really makes a difference and helps other people find the show. We hope you'll also follow along with our shenanigans on Instagram and TikTok at Psyche Magic Podcast. Psyche Magic was produced and recorded by me, Jordan Hale. Editing for this episode is by Masuzu Inaga. Our theme music is by Young Summer. Artwork is by Annika Murphy. Special thanks go to Daniel Higbee, Grace Fuse, and Michael McMillan. Thank you so much for listening. I'll leave you with a question. If you must sleep through a third of your life, are you willing to sleep through your dreams too? Get your dream journals out, y'all. Until next time.